take item 2 and move it up to number 1, and item 4 and move it up to number 2.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to defer item 2 to a later date, either it be a work session or whatever. Myself and I think some of my fellow commissioners don't feel like that to try to do this in 30, 45 minutes is appropriate.
Got a motion and second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Item 4 is to discuss the tree ordinance for Glynn County. It says for Glynn County. I think everybody realizes that this is primarily for St. Simons. I don't think that the mainland is ready to adopt the tree ordinance over and above the existing plans, but certainly anybody can weigh in on that. What Will is going to go through and talk about is a combination of a lot of ordinances that we found from Savannah, Hilton Head, and metropolitan Atlanta. They are very, very aggressive with their tree ordinances because they recognize the importance of maintaining their tree canopy. So Will's worked very, very hard on putting this together, and then, as we have done, we put it out to you guys, and we put it out to the planning commissions, and we want, and now it's time for feedback. You know, are we ready to get this aggressive with our tree policies or not? So before we answer that, Will, I'm going to let you go through your work and how you've done some of this, and then we'll open up the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, our office was asked to draft an amendment to the tree protection ordinance. Currently, there's a tree canopy protection ordinance in section 624, or a zoning ordinance. That ordinance applies only to properties on St. Simons Island, which requires site plan approval. Single-family residential lots and developments that existed at the time of the original adoption of that ordinance are exempt from the requirements, with the exception that if one of those properties, not single-family residential, they're completely exempt, but if a property that otherwise would be exempt comes in and needs a site plan amendment or something like that, then they become subject to the current ordinance. The ordinance requires that each property maintain a certain minimum number of tree credits, and those minimum tree credits can be achieved by either retaining existing trees or planting new trees, or a combination of the two, and a tree plan which shows how that property is going to be in compliance with the tree ordinance is required at the time of site plan application. The ordinance that the amendment to the ordinance that we created was in response to some of the issues that were expressed to us that were problems on St. Simons Island under the current ordinance. One of the main issues being clear cutting of property before it was developed. And looking at some of the ordinances around the state, there are a lot that are more comprehensive than that. The tree ordinance kind of creates two categories of activities which are subject to the tree requirements, and that's development activity and non-development activity. Development activity is anything requiring a building permit, site plan, a land disturbing permit, or if you do any grading or clearing of the site. And one of the reasons that's in there is to try to catch development on the front end before someone goes out there and clear cuts a piece of property. They would have to come in and get permission they have to show their compliance with the tree protection plan. So before they got a building permit, site plan, LDA, did any clearing, they have to submit an application to the county showing how they're going to meet the minimum tree density requirements and get that plan approved before they're able to do anything on that site. The other category is non-development activity, which is just anything else you can think of that you do on your property. And this is kind of where the single-family residential or that sort of stuff would get brought in. You know, pruning of trees, cutting down of trees, anything that doesn't otherwise require some sort of development permit falls into that category. And for that process, you wouldn't have to go through the entire application and approval process. You would just submit sort of a short narrative of what you want to do, either some sketches or pictures of the trees you want to cut, and then you get a letter of permission from the administrator. And in this case, what we have is set up now, under the current ordinance, or the current version of the ordinance, the administrator would be the community development director. That's a placeholder. That's something y'all need to decide whether y'all want that responsibility to be there or somewhere else. Certain types of trees would be designated specimen trees, depending upon their height, their size, the species that they are, that sort of thing. And those specimen trees, the removal of those specimen trees would be heavily discouraged and disincentivized. In the event that a developer comes in and can't meet the required tree density on their property, they would have the option to do one of two things. They could plant trees at another location, or they could pay into a tree replacement fund, or what's a lot of times called a tree bank. And what they would do is there would be a cost. We'd figure out the cost for them to plant those trees somewhere. They would pay that money to the county, and that money would be designated strictly for the replanting of trees.
I got two questions. Number one, you said this was primarily the St. Simon's Island
Exclusively.
exclusively. So what are you saying by that? That all what we're talking about right here is exclusively for St. Simon?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, well, why wouldn't we go ahead and just make it for the whole county?
You just made Miss Turner the happiest woman in Glynn County.
Oh, my Lord.
I will,
And my second question would be,
Because we
How
can
does
do this
this-
meeting right now.
Yes, sir, we might as well all go home.
You might as well just wrap it
well,
up.
my second question would be,
There's your answer.
does the city of Brunswick have a tree ordinance?
We're talking about,
It don't make what difference does it make?
Well, I mean, we say you're in the county, don't cut that oak tree down, and you cross the street, and you got the same oak tree sitting over here, and you can go cut that one down. Now, why couldn't we get something coordinated with the city, so we got a county, an entire inside the county boundaries ordinance, instead of trying to do a little bit, be a perfect example.
Bob, the reality
hey,
is,
Let me give you a perfect example. Right in front of my office, about a year ago, right there behind the Chinese restaurant, were two of the most beautiful oak trees in this county. And I go out there one afternoon after work, or I'm getting out of my office, and I'm looking over there, and there's a tree crew over there whacking these perfectly good, beautiful, 100-plus-year-old oak trees down for no reason.
well, maybe they took them up there to the
And the only
USS
thing-
Constitution and reinforced the planks, because that's how they built the US Constitution, the old Ironsides. But let me tell you, the reality is, and I'm gonna say it one more time, District 1, which is about half of this county land-wise, they ain't gonna go for it. They don't want nobody telling them what to do with their trees, and they don't wanna tell nobody else what to do with their trees. So I think if we keep this confined to St. Simon's, we can have a discussion, but it ain't gonna go with District 1.
Segregation,
I mean-
segregation
I
for.
don't know what world you living in if you think it will, but it ain't gonna happen.
And to echo Commissioner Browning, I can't support it. When it comes to property rights, my feeling is, if I own a house, I don't care how many trees I have on that piece of property. If I bought it and I paid for it and it belongs to me, then by God, I'll cut down every tree on it if I want.
Purpose of the tree board.
Right now, or in the,
Period.
well, right now, the tree board looks at county properties, county trees, and if the county wants to do something on county property involves, like for instance, the courthouse over there, when it has something to do with that, they'll check those trees out and see if
So it's only for county property.
currently correct. I mean, you could, in a version of this, you could include them in some capacity, but this draft does include, or contemplate an arborist, going to that level and hiring that person to check out the trees, if there's a call. They do all the legwork for that. But, if the board, in answer to Commissioner Coleman's question, is this could, the board's prerogative, but could expand it out beyond St. Simons. St. Simons was, you can also isolate it to a certain geographic area, as done in this, but you could expand it. You could, to some capacity, include a tree board, or use them as part of this process. And there's a lot of variations and variables you could add to this to change that out.
Let me ask you this, for purposes of talking about this for St. Simons, do we have any idea, because I know nobody's kept count, do we have any idea as to the complaints that have come in when trees have, when people see trees that are being cut down, are the complaints, are the numbers of complaints more skewed in favor or against the multifamily developments or in residential area, or, single family? Do we know that? And the reason I ask is because even on St. Simons, where I don't live, this seems to be pretty heavy-handed, and if you didn't have another multifamily development on St. Simons, this is a lot, I think, to put on the homeowners that are over there. There's some hefty fines here, and there's a lot of rules to go by, and I don't understand all of them yet. But is that where the problem is? Or a home that's being built for an individual on those lots? Because have we got that many complaints? Or is it more the multi-family units and what developers may be doing on those lots that people are hollering about more? Maybe we should focus on, if we're gonna have a discussion, maybe we should focus on that. I don't know.
Let's do that. Let's talk about that. And obviously, this has been highlighted over the last 12 months because of some developments, and it's been highlighted because, there are people that have been very vocal about the fact that one of the things that attracts visitors and people to live on St. Simons is the tree canopy. And as you get into these conversations, it's pretty evident that we have been, we take down trees on the island. I take down trees out of my yard. I've been cutting my own trees for 26 years. Haven't replanted a tree. We have developers that come in and they take down trees. And when we say a developer, it could be for a commercial piece of property or it could be for a new subdivision. But we have continually, as long as I've lived there are continually trees being cut down. And unless it's a county right-of-way, there's no plan in place for the replacement of those trees. So, having heard that, and you guys went to a lot of the meetings and you get emails and things like that, I think the goal needs to be, to supplement your question, Mike, what I call a zero net sum game. And that's kind of where this discussion started amongst the different entities, was that if you take a tree down, you got to replace a tree. And I know, and I'm with you, I'm a private property rights guy. And so this kind of pains me to go through some of this, but at some point in time, where do you stop taking trees down without having a replacement program, and not just for new subdivisions and commercial development, but also the individual homeowner? And I say it for this reason, and I'm not saying that that's where we're going with this, but we need to talk about it. It needs to be on the table. What happens if single-family homeowners, we define that as a 6,000 square foot lot or a 3-acre estate? If we put an ordinance together, and let's talk about low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit right now, the people on the island, if you told them that somebody was going to buy 4 acres of land to create a subdivision, and currently we have nothing that says that person can't clear cut all the trees and then start the development, they go, that's wrong. There ought to be something in place to keep a developer from clear cutting a large parcel of land to build something, whether it be a commercial building or whether it be a new subdivision. People will get on board with that. But what if somebody tries to game the system and says, I'll get the private landowner to go ahead and cut the trees down for me that I want cut down, and then I'll come in and buy the property from them. So some of what you see is in reaction to trying to keep somebody from gaming the system. And somewhere between the two, I'm hoping that between the planning boards and the tree commissions, and most importantly, this group of 7 people, we can find a middle ground that says we need to protect the tree canopy on St. Simon's, and here's some of the rules you need to play by, so that we don't continue to lose tree canopy and without a replacement program. This starts the conversation. And as you have surmised reading it, it's a pretty aggressive
Talk
program.
about what you said, clear cut. I mean, if you want to know, if you haven't been that way lately, take a trip down that street now. I just noticed that a few days ago. Well, over the weekend, I went over to the island. And when you go by Hamilton Landing now, it's like, you know, it's like blue sky and sunshine where it didn't used to be like that. It was nice tree canopy in there. And I mean, I thought to myself, going by there, I mean, even Sherry made a comment about, wow, that sure opened up things, didn't it? And then I looked over at the houses in the Hamilton Landing subdivision and I went, I wonder how those people over there in those $1 million houses feel about all that daylight all of a sudden. And I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about here. You know, cutting trees and development, you know, I believe it can be a amicable solution there that can be worked to, but that word clear cut is something that I think we ought to capitalize on. Is that, I mean, yes, the live oak trees are our #1 concern, I would think. And then, I mean, my wife's got some friends that live in California. They came out here and visited us one time. They never seen an oak tree with moss in it. What is that? What's that gray stuff hanging out of that tree? You know, I mean, there's plenty of people that ain't got a clue what we've got here. They've seen it in pictures, but other than that, they don't have a clue what a live oak tree is, let alone Spanish moss growing in it. So, preservation, yes. Absolute minimum cut down, yes. If the developers, I mean, you know, if you don't want to go to the extra time and expense to build around the trees, then go somewhere else. I mean, you know, we got plenty of people to sign off on that. So I just don't see anybody saying it's okay for people to just, you know, whack their trees down. You know, I've had a couple of experiences. I had a neighbor right in front of me had beautiful sweet gum trees growing up out there. Knocked the sun off my house in the late afternoon. I come home one day and he done cut down 8 or 9 of these big sweet gum trees because he didn't want to mess with the leaves. But you buy your riding lawnmower with a mulcher blade on it like I got, and you ain't gonna have to rake the first leaf. Okay? I do it day in and day out. So I mean, there's an answer to a lot of things here that have been brought up, but you know, I was born and raised here, and I'll give you all a perfect example of what. Let's take Norwich Street. 55 years ago, Norwich Street was the main drag in Brunswick, Georgia. It was lined with oak trees, it was lined with palm trees. And I remember the day I was right down there at 1606 Norwich Street where my aunt used to live. And the crews came up out front. She had a big, pretty sweet gum tree growing right there. Back then you had the sidewalk, and then you had a little grassy area, and then you had the curb. And the deal was they were going to widen Norwich Street. And they came in and cut every single tree down all the way out to the city, way on past the city limit sign. And now y'all see what Norwich Street looks like. There ain't a tree on it nowhere. And where I was born and raised at 2007 Norwich Street, private school was right across the street where I went to the first grade. Huge oak trees, like we got over there in that courtyard. I sat right there on the front porch of my grandma's house and watched them bulldozers knock those huge oak trees down. And what's there now? Well, it was a grocery store to start with, a big giant parking lot, and now it's some kind of store and an auto zone. And not the first tree in sight, all the way down Norwich Street. And if you want to know what old Norwich Street looks like, go downstairs into the tax commissioner's office and look at the pictures on the walls. This happens, and I mean, 55 years is really not that long ago when you start taking into consideration what we're considering here. About 55 years from now, what are we going? Are we still going to be able to look out that window right there and see those big oak trees out there up and down Reynolds Street or around our courthouse and all that? Might need to get DNR involved. They give you an answer.
This is a good time for me to, everybody knows, probably owes Sandy Turbity, but Sandy's here. Sandy has started the Tree Foundation. Miriam Lancaster's with her. They're going to be up and running, and it may help take care of some of the issues that we've talked about, where they're going to actually be raising funds to help do tree replacement. There may be people on the island as part of this ordinance where you can earn tree credits and donate money to the Tree Foundation as a tax deductible gift, and then those funds can be used for tree replacement on our public right-of-ways in the neighborhoods that they have for camping. I want a committee. I need Will Worley on it because he's lived and eat and breathe this thing. I'd like to have one commissioner on it, and I want to get the tree people involved. I'd like to have somebody from the Tree Foundation. I'd like 1 or 2 developers on this thing. I want to put together a committee, let them take this thing and come back to us. But we need to get it off of this table and into other people's hands and let them work through that.
I would recommend a member of the.
I'll volunteer for that.
All right, I got Commissioner Coleman. I'm gonna make you chairman of this committee. And Sandy, I'd like 1 member from the Tree Foundation, Miriam, and then we'll get somebody from our tree advisory board on there. And then if you guys give me a name, a couple of developers.
Planning commission.
Yeah, no, I'd sit down on the planning commission. They'll be represented. But we'll get that going immediately and come up with something that everybody can work on. Okay? Thank you, Commissioner.